welcome to Meet the Shop Teachers. I'm Leonard Kaplan along with Lou Spagnola, who is the graphic arts teacher.
Correct.
Shop teacher.
Correct.
And you teach along with your newly hired brother, John Spagnola.
Correct.
And we're here at the Medford Vocational Technical High School, right in the studio, and I just want to say that my crew of 3 freshmen are running this show right now.
Oh, that's impressive.
It's a mark of confidence that I thought they were ready to do this.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
That's right.
Like the mother bird, drop them from the nest. They either
right.
fly or they go splat.
I have no control from where I'm sitting over what they're doing, including they're laughing out there. We won't say why they're laughing, but anyway.
Well, I am kind of funny looking, so I understand it.
We are going to talk to you about your shop. I like subjects like this because I'm curious about it and I don't know that much about it myself. So let's start with the graphic arts industry. Is it known mostly as graphic design industry or graphic arts industry?
Well, there's the problem. See, graphic arts was kind of a 70s term. The problem, though, is it's become so convoluted with graphic arts, graphic design, graphic communications, printing. Then there's design and visual communications. And let's face it, the whole industry, we're a communications industry. You know, even when it was the 70s, when you were using lead type. Fact is, you typeset and printed newspapers or flyers or things that came in the mail. So ultimately what ended up happening, the only thing that really, I guess, went with the technological boom of computers and everything is we just found easier ways to communicate, but it's still a communications industry. So
that's very interesting because media tech is technical, the same communication industry. So there's a lot of overlap between our 2 programs.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why it's good that we can put together at times some projects where my students and your students can work well together, because obviously there's a media portion of something that could be on TV. There's a mail portion. There's also, when you think about even emails, like people don't understand, they think about emails as something as simple as just, oh yeah, you know, you just type it out and you send it. But a lot of times, though, there's imagery that comes in there, or there's, it could be something that a typesetter worked on for 35, 40 minutes and sent in an email where we're just reading the message, but we don't realize the work that went into actually setting it up.
Really?
Because now, for instance, take a coffee cup like this. Now, you have the New England coffee logo. Somebody had to make that logo up. And then it's got a color on there because that bar, it says, medium, caution, contents hot. Well, it's in red because red is a universal sign of warning or stop or action. So when you think about, this is a mini marketing campaign that somebody had to set up. Now, it could just say coffee in block letters, and you know, that would be boring. So that's why when you get back to where we've started with, even an email has to be exciting, because otherwise it's going to read like a textbook, and you know.
And it would be boring and no one would pay attention to it.
Yes.
Very interesting, very interesting. So this, again, overlap between designs for cups and signs like neon signs and business cards, things that we don't think about, logos on a ketchup bottle, all that stuff. So how do you learn, or how do you teach people the difference between fonts and how people are affected by a certain font as opposed to another font, making these choices?
Well, you know what? There's a large learning curve there, and a lot of it's trial and error, but some of it is very simple in just awareness. Like what I like to tell the kids is take a look around, look at every street sign, look at even like stop signs. Look at the font that's on a stop sign. You know, when you look, one of my favorite things is the Nike campaign, Just Do It. And one of the things about it is it's a large, fat block font that speaks loudly. So things like block fonts and, you know, commanding kind of fonts, it's more of an action type, a bold statement. You know, you wouldn't make a bold statement with a thin font because it's kind of like yelling at somebody in a soft voice. Right. And, you know, it loses the effectiveness of it. So in terms of that, it's an awareness thing. You want kids to look, and even adults, because like I'm sure even telling you, you'll probably think, wow, next time I drive around Revere or Medford, I'm going to look at the street signs and I'm going to take a look at the fonts they used.
Right.
You know, they have to be easily readable, for instance. Products, I mean, even New England coffee, that's just a serif font, but it reads nicely, it goes well together. There's a boldness to it, but it also has a little bit of an old, if you look at the font, it's got a little bit of jaggedness to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of meant to be a traditional look. Yes, it's got to have this look to it that, you know, when you think about New England, well, New England, it's the oldest part of the country. It was the first settled, it was the first developed, you know, getting back to Pilgrims and Amerigo Vespucci and how much history to want to talk about.
Right.
But yes, it's all there within a little bit of an ad campaign. So that's why when it comes to fonts, it's, I guess the best way I can relate it to you, remember the 70s when you'd be watching, like, say, a hockey game, and the fonts that would come up with the score, it would say Bruins 3, Rangers 2, and it was this lit font with no character, just almost typewriter graphics.
Well, that was all that was possible
Exactly,
with graphics online. When I started in video, we had a very basic machine that looked just like that. In fact, I remember when the internet first came out, when I first started getting email from Northeastern, my alma mater, and there wasn't any choice in fonts or anything that you could design. It was just a miracle to get it on the screen.
Yeah, and that's true. That is true.
Pretty interesting. So there's some overlap also, not only between your program and mine, but in your program and web design, because they have to make a lot of choices in their websites and all kinds of stuff online. Different companies like Amazon and Target or any of them, they have to develop a distinctive look.
Yeah, and the truth is, if you design something, it's never as simple as you know, a company. I need you to design something for me. Okay, what are you designing it for? It's not even sometimes about the ad campaign itself. Sometimes it's just the medium, because if you're designing for media like TV, that's one thing. You're designing for print, that's another.
Yeah.
So it's two different ends, but then you have web as the third end, because what you would design for web might be similar to TV, but it's not going to be the same. And what you design for print is going to be similar, but you would end up almost having one media campaign to three different mediums that have to be similar but different. So there's a lot of work for everybody in there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are limitations online in colors that you could use as opposed to in real life, correct?
Yeah, the thing is now, not to turn this into a, you know, too technical for the average viewer, but print is CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. TV, internet, RGB, which is red, green, blue. And so right there are two differences that, you know, what you come up with, all the print colors are not necessarily able to be replicated by RGB. And so there's a, you know, as soon as you see the difference, it's this amount of colors are going to be in print, but only this amount is available in web. So oftentimes you have to make some decisions and say, well, I love this this fuchsia. It just doesn't translate to the monitor the way it pops out in print. So it is what it is. You have to just live with it.
Very interesting. Now I want to get back to some of that stuff about graphic arts history, graphic design history, and things that we used to see and don't see anymore. But I want you, for the parents out there and for students who haven't taken graphic design yet, why don't you run through kind of what your order of business is in the class?
My order of business in the class. Well, it all starts like Uncle Sam. I want you. The truth of the matter is not everybody is creative.
Yeah.
Except the fact that we all have some level of creativity that can be put to use within this industry. So it's almost a contradiction. So
So not everybody's a prodigy, let's put it that way, and everybody has different degrees of creativity.
And now the thing is, a lot of people are extremely creative
Yeah.
in terms of they could sit at a computer with Photoshop or with Illustrator and they can come up with this beautiful design. But the fact is that design could very well be worthless other than as a piece of art to hang on the wall. Because, see, the other contradiction is design is not necessarily art. There's an artistic value to it, but we're not necessarily, and the way I run my program that I like to state, we're not an art degree, we're an advertising. I look at us as we're the beginning stages of advertising and marketing and printing and publishing, and so I would want parents to understand I'm not trying to give their kids 3 years of drawing and painting. We don't do that. We don't paint or draw. We sketch. Like, getting back to my cup again, somebody made about probably 100 sketches of that logo. And when you do a sketch, you might start out with just any old lettering, but at the end of the day, you're going to try and make it so that it's as close to what's going to be designed as possible. And so then you're going to look them over and come up with something. There's art is involved in that, but ultimately that creativity has nothing to do with drawing ability. It has to do with what's going on up here. And, you know, your head only holds so much. You know, sometimes you got to go outside of it, and you have to remember things that you've seen in your life. And you have to remember even other coffee cups that you could say, you know, I saw somebody walking with one once and I like the colors. So I try and make it so that parents understand that we're a thinking shop. We're not a place to come and I'm just going to stand at the board and say, okay, so today I'm going to teach you about colors, and today I'm going to teach you about typesetting. And you know, there is an element of that in every class, but it's much more freeform, and it's much more, we learned this today, how are you going to apply that tomorrow? And that's where I want kids to be excited. I want them to understand that their learning is, I'm going to help them in the learning, but as far as the doing, it's going to be their job to put themselves in the driver's seat and say, how do I want to make this go today? So
you allow them some leeway with their creativity and to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's art, but it's art designed for functionality.
Absolutely, good way of putting it. And you know what it is? I think trial and error to me is obviously in psychology, it's always going to be a great way to learn. And the best way they can learn what doesn't work sometimes is by doing it and then looking it over and being able to recognize after the fact, this is why this doesn't work. And if I tell somebody why something doesn't work, it's like telling somebody don't touch that hot stove. You know, the burn teaches them a lot better than my words can. So I want them to understand, put something together, hang it up on the wall, look at it, and can you see why that doesn't work? Yes. There's more value in that than anything else.
So they critique each other.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
That's very interesting. It's very much like what I tell my students. If you have 5 video editors and give them all the same footage, those 5 video editors will edit their projects all differently.
Yeah.
They might put different shots in at different times, have a close-up in certain areas where I might not, and it's amazing the differences.
Yeah, and you'd like to believe that kids are all going to have their own idea. I mean, I wouldn't think you or anyone else, you know, cookie cutter teaching and learning, it's good in some areas, you know. I mean, in math and in English and in studies of exactitude, as I like to say.
That's true.
You know, in math, there is one answer, and this is it, and you have to get to that answer. Maybe your figuring might be varying, but the answer has to be the same. I would think with you and with where we're doing in graphics, I think that there has to be a certain amount of leeway to understand that you have to reach this customer with this poster.
Right.
How are you going to do it? And obviously, there can be a lot of different ways, but the effectiveness has to be there. I mean, even a stop sign. What is a stop sign? It's an ad campaign, if you think about it. We need people to stop at this intersection. We need to create something that's going to make everybody understand. And it's more than just, well, everybody knows it's a law or it's a stop sign. we don't know. We see that stop sign from 10 miles away. We don't know if it says stop. It could say post on it. People wouldn't even notice it because their brain sees it and they don't even make the connection. They just know automatically, okay, there's a stop sign coming.
So do you start with business cards and then pamphlets and stop signs?
Actually,
is there an
no.
order of business as to what project that you have your beginners do first?
Well, I always like to start out, the easy things in terms of color theory, complementary colors, what colors go well together. The thing is, to spend a lot of time on that, to me, you can hang a chart on the wall with complementary colors. I have one, and I'll be sitting there and I'll need to put something together and I'll say, I think blue will look really well. But then I'll have to look up at the chart and say, yeah, I want to put an orangish yellow. I still have to look. We all kind of do to some degree. But I like to spend the time on things, the building blocks. Like, for instance, we started off, my sophomores this year, for instance, we started off in September. We did some related exercises. We did a few beginning things. The first project I gave them was a Halloween postcard. Now you say to yourself, well, who sends a postcard for Halloween? Nobody does. But it was just a fact of they learned how to size something, they learned colors, and they learned how to put things together. And so by starting with projects like that, then when we get into larger things like posters, and then you get into smaller things, so it's kind of funny that you'd think that a larger thing might be harder to do than a smaller thing. Problem is, when you do something large, you have all this space to work with. And then when you tell them, well, you have to do something now on a 5x3 postcard, well, now they have to use smaller fonts, they have to use smaller graphics, they have to try and fit things into smaller spaces, and it becomes much more of a problem.
Right.
So we try and do things in a certain order that's one thing is gonna build on to the next, and they can take elements from the first, bring it to the second.
Very interesting stuff. I wish I could take your class, Let's talk a little bit about, and this is true for all shops, resumes and business cards. And I would imagine you would be a specialist in those items. You've run businesses before in graphic design. What's the biggest mistake that people do when making a resume, designing a resume?
Well, the thing about a resume now is today they've made it so that there's so many components, like, you don't have to put your age on there anymore, sex. You don't have to put anything on there, actually. You can't get, if you got fired, companies can't ask. The thing is, though, it still comes down to some of the main do's and don'ts, and you don't need to put your life story on a resume.
Right.
To me, I think that the best thing you could do is to put down for instance, if I'm hiring somebody, and I need these 5 things, those are the 5 things I want to see on a resume. And so when people need to realize, to me, there's not one resume you send out to 5 companies. It's 5 resumes you would send out, because depending on the company, you really want to make it that, what does this company need? What did the ad ask for? When you called and spoke to the hiring manager, what did they say? Then tailor your resume to it, because you don't have to put your life story on there. You just want it on there 2 things: your competence, your experience.
In terms of fonts, Times New Roman, Courier,
I'll tell you
Georgia?
what, it's still, to me, people think of Times as boring.
Really?
Well, yeah, I mean, Times and Helvetica are the 2, as far as Times for serif font, Helvetica for a sans serif. People think of them as boring. And they don't understand, for instance, that Helvetica, there's about 1 million different companies out there that use Helvetica in their actual logo, and people don't even realize it. And Times, from a design standpoint, you can do a lot of things with it, because it's a traditionally nice-looking font. So if you put that on a resume, the thing is, there's a lot of things with designs now that I've seen resumes with bleeds and multicolors and all kinds of splashy things on there. And it's good, but it reminds me of a great paint job on a lousy car. You know, it's at the end of the day, it might look nice, but it still has to start up every day and run. And you know, your resume, it might stand out. I'll tell you a funny story. I was unemployed. I got in a car accident. I hurt my back, so I was out of work for 6 months. And I had left my job. I was starting a new job, and because of the accident, I couldn't take the job. So now I'm looking in the paper. I was eating, you know, eating a bowl of Cookie Crisp or something. I'm sitting there reading it, and I see, you know, there was a job opening. And I said, that's in Malden. That's right next door. Okay, great. So I called up. They said, yeah, send your resume. Can you fax it over? Great. So I faxed my resume over. Of all the things on the resume, and I came to find out that they got 60 applicants. Mm-hmm. When I went over there, the first thing the guy asked me was, so you golf? And I said, yeah. Huh. He goes, yeah, that's great. And so then he said, and you went to Northeast Vocational? I go, yeah, I graduated in '86. Yeah, me too. Huh. And that was it. I got the job because I had on there personal interest, golf. Right. And he saw where I went to high school. So the fact of the matter is, those other 60 people didn't golf and didn't go to Northeast Voc. So I got the job because of two of the most meaningless things on the resume. It didn't matter how the design was. It didn't matter the font.
Well, they may have golfed and they may have done that other stuff, but they didn't put it on there.
So that's the thing about.
Very interesting.
All right, so you never know.
Okay, let's transition to business cards. The raised lettering. What do you think of that? Is that classy or is it tacky or what?
Okay, so now I have to find a way to plead the fifth on this because a member of my advisory board, place that I worked at for I worked there for 14 years. Yeah. And well, they do raised printing. And now I guess the best way I can answer this is when you see regular boring kinds of work and you put raised printing on it, I think it looks very tacky. Okay. I think it looks outdated. It looks awful.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I've seen some really great designs where people, the best one I ever saw, I actually worked on it was a fence company. And so the whole card was just, it had the information on it. And then in nice gray ink, it was a chain link fence. And the chain links were raised. Underneath it was flat. And it was a beautiful looking card. And it was the kind of thing that there is using raised printing to make it stand out among other cards. You know, so to me, raised printing, I think you have to have a use for it. It's like anything else, like embossing or, you know, any kind of crash imprint. You could do it, but everybody does it. So, I mean, does it really help it stand out, you know?
I think the theme of this is the relationship between graphic design and other disciplines. Yeah. There's some comparisons to fashion there. There's certain things that people wear that are tacky. There's certain business cards that are tacky. There's posters that are tacky. So you can't really teach good taste, can you?
Yeah, but you know something though? Tacky is kind of even that, like if you think about now, okay, so I was a kid in the 70s. You remember like what women were wearing in like say 1970? They dressed like Rhoda, you know? They had on like scarves and the greens were it was the gaudiest green, and orange was it wasn't even like a nice shade of orange, it was just orange. It was Halloween orange. And then turquoise, which, you know, people think about turquoise. It can look very nice when it's closer to teal, but no, turquoise and green and orange, they were the gaudiest colors, and purple, all these colors combined. When you see them now, you see them now, it's awful. But back then, it stood out. It was so bold and made a statement. Yes.
Everything is context.
Exactly.
All right, in the final minutes of this show, I'd like to ask you, what do you foresee in the future for the shop and in graphic design, the art?
Well, in the shop, my hope, we want to continue to draw kids. We want to get kids out in the industry. That's the main thing. The industry itself, we're affected by obviously the fact that everybody thinks that because they have a color printer at home and because you can get Photoshop at home, everybody's an expert.
Right.
And people incorrectly see that as, well, there's not going to be a job because, well, people can do that. And it's no different than the recording industry. People can film their own commercials at home.
That's right.
It's just not like that. You know, I wouldn't want to hire a plumber that learned on their own.
Right.
I wouldn't want to hire an electrician that learned on their own. That's why we have professionals, and that's why we have professionally taught students that become professionals. And where obviously I'd like to keep getting a good amount of kids to come in that are passionate about wanting to do something like what we do, to create advertisements, to create marketing materials, and, you know, take it further. Come to our shop, go to college, you know, get out in industry. We want to find co-op jobs, all of the things that you would think every department would want to do. That's where I kind of look to, you know, the future.
Now, everybody in the school, I think in the high school as well as the Voc, depends on your services. So that must get a little bit overwhelming after a while.
Well, yeah, I had to get another deadbolt for my door. So, you know, I actually have a wig now, so if people, you know, see me in the hallway, I have to suddenly, you know, I learned how to duck into, you know, just whatever open door there is. But no, I'm glad. We opened our doors. When we took over the program, I started at the beginning of last year, and my goal was open the doors, whoever needs anything, whether it's in the school, the district. The mayor has gotten a couple of jobs printed, personal jobs. I welcome as much as we could possibly get in, because like this term, for instance, my sophomores, they haven't actually gotten one project from me, because I told them third term we're going to use everything we learned the first two terms.
Right.
And so they're doing all the work, and that's great.
That's great. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's not always perfect. It's not always going to be, you know, all sunshine. You know, I mean, every rose has its thorn.
Right.
But we just want to see more roses and less thorns.
All right, on that note, we're going to get going because we have another period to go to with the bell. And until next time, I'm Leonard Kaplan with Meet the Shop Teachers saying so long, and be back with us with another guest.